tried to intervene. One of them pulled out a gun and we all backed off. So I found the letter describing the secret 1991 meeting where it was decided that hip-hop would be used to promote private prisons through the rise of gangster rap, and it paints a pretty dark and compelling picture. Between the late 80s and early 90s, I was what you would call a decision maker with one of the most established companies in the music industry. In early 1991, I was invited to attend a closed-door meeting with a small group of music business insiders to discuss rap music's new direction. The meeting was held at a private residence on the outskirts of Los Angeles. I remember about 25 to 30 people there. Among the attendees was a small group of unfamiliar faces who stayed to themselves and made no attempt to socialize beyond their circle. Based on their behavior and formal appearances, they didn't seem to be in our industry. One of my industry colleagues, who shall remain nameless, thanked us for attending. He then gave the floor to a man who only introduced himself by first name and gave no further details about his personal background. He briefly praised all of us for the success we had achieved in our industry. He explained that the companies we work for had invested millions into the building of privately owned prisons, and that our positions of influence in the music industry would actually impact the profitability of these investments. I remember many of us in the group immediately looking at each other in confusion. At the time, I didn't know what a private prison was, but I wasn't the only one. We were told that these prisons were built by privately owned companies who received funding from the government based on the number of inmates. The more inmates, the more money the government would pay these prisons. It was also made clear to us that since these prisons are privately owned, as they become publicly traded, we'd be able to buy shares. He told us that since our employers had become silent investors in this prison business, it was now in their interest to make sure that these prisons remained filled. Our job would be to help make this happen by marketing music which promotes criminal behavior, rap being the music of choice. Rap music was becoming an increasingly profitable market for our companies, and as an employee, we'd also be able to buy personal stocks in these prisons. Immediately, silence came over the room. You could have heard a pin drop. I remember looking around to make sure I wasn't dreaming and saw half of the people with dropped jaws. My daze was interrupted when someone shouted, "Is this a fucking joke?" At this point, things became chaotic. Two of the men who were part of the unfamiliar group grabbed the man who shouted and attempted to remove him from the house. A few of us, myself included, tried to intervene, but one of them pulled out a gun and we all backed off. My industry colleague who had opened the meeting earlier hurried out to meet us and reminded us that we had signed an agreement and would suffer the consequences of speaking about this publicly or even with those who had attended the meeting. I asked him why he was involved with something this corrupt, and he replied that it was bigger than the music business and nothing we want to challenge without risking consequences. We all protested, and as he walked back into the house, I remember word for word the last thing he said. "It's out of my hands now. Remember, you signed an agreement." So you tell me, do you think this is a real letter from a real insider, or do you think this is made up?